The bullet grazed Mason Fletcher's shoulder just as the sun dipped below the mesa, and he knew right then that returning to Randsburg, California, would mean facing a life he had deliberately left behind 5 years ago. He pressed his hand against the wound, feeling the warm blood seep through his shirt as his horse carried him steadily toward the small mining town that had sprung up in the Mojave Desert. It was 1897, and Randsburg had transformed from a dusty collection of tents into a proper settlement after gold was discovered 3 years prior. Mason had heard about the strike while working cattle drives through Nevada, but he had stayed away, content with his solitary existence moving from ranch to ranch, never staying long enough to form attachments or responsibilities. The wound was not serious, just a reminder of why he avoided gambling establishments in towns where miners spent their earnings recklessly. A disagreement over cards, a man who could not accept losing, and Mason had once again found himself on the wrong end of someone's poor judgment. He had fired back in self-defense, but his shot went wide intentionally. He never wanted to kill unless absolutely necessary, and tonight had not required such finality. As Randsburg came into view, Mason could see the glow of lanterns illuminating the main street. Buildings lined both sides now, real structures with wooden frames and glass windows that reflected the lamplight. The largest building bore a sign that read Reynolds General Store and Supply, and Mason made note of it. He would need bandages and whiskey to clean the wound properly. He guided his horse toward the livery stable at the edge of town, noting the late hour meant most respectable folks would already be home. A young man emerged from the stable, wiping his hands on his pants. "Evening, mister. Need a stall for your horse." "And some grain if you have it," Mason said, dismounting carefully to avoid jostling his shoulder. The movement still sent a sharp pain through his arm, and he grunted despite himself. The stable hand noticed the blood on Mason's shirt. "You need a doctor. We got one just down the street, doctor." "Morrison. He is decent enough, does not ask too many questions." "I will manage on my own, just need supplies." Mason paid the young man and made his way back toward the general store he had seen. His boots kicked up small clouds of dust as he walked, and he could hear the distant sound of piano music coming from one of the saloons. The store's windows were dark, but he could see a light coming from the back, suggesting someone might still be present. He tried the door and found it unlocked. A bell chimed above his head as he entered, and he called out, looking to purchase some supplies. "We are closed," came a woman's voice from the back room, clear and firm despite the late hour. "I apologize for the intrusion, but I need bandages and antiseptic. I can pay well." Mason moved further into the store, noting the organized shelves stocked with everything from mining equipment to canned goods. This was a well-run establishment. The woman emerged from the back room carrying a ledger, and Mason found himself momentarily forgetting about his wounded shoulder. She was tall for a woman, with dark auburn hair pulled back in a practical bun, though several strands had escaped to frame her face. Her eyes were a striking green that assessed him with intelligence and no small amount of wariness. She wore a simple dress of deep blue cotton with a white apron tied at her waist, both showing signs of a long day's work but still neat and proper. "You are bleeding on my floor," she said, setting down the ledger and crossing her arms. "What happened?" "A misunderstanding." "Nothing that concerns anyone in Randsburg, I assure you. I just need supplies to tend it myself, and I will be on my way." Mason tried to keep his voice steady, but the pain was increasing now that the initial shock had worn off. The woman studied him for a long moment, her green eyes moving from his face to his shoulder and back again. "That wound needs proper cleaning, and judging by the angle, you will not be able to reach it adequately yourself. I am Zara Reynolds. My father owns this store, and before you protest, I have helped tend injuries before. Mining accidents are common enough around here that most of us have learned basic medical care. Mason Fletcher. And I appreciate the offer, but I have been managing my own affairs for some time now. Clearly not very well if you are getting shot in card games. Zara moved past him to lock the front door and flipped the sign to indicate the store was closed. Sit down at the counter before you fall down. Your face is going pale, Mr. Fletcher, and I would rather not have you bleeding out in the middle of my store. There was something in her tone that brooked no argument, a combination of practicality and genuine concern that made Mason comply. He sat on the stool behind the counter, watching as Zara gathered supplies with efficient movements. She brought over bandages, a bottle of whiskey, clean cloths, and a basin of water she retrieved from the back room. "This will hurt," she said, not unkindly, as she helped him remove his vest and began unbuttoning his shirt. Her hands were steady and warm, and Mason found himself very aware of her proximity. She smelled faintly of lavender and something else he could not quite place, perhaps the paper and ink from the ledgers she had been working on. When she pulled back the fabric to reveal the wound, she let out a small breath. "You were fortunate. Another inch to the left and this would have been much worse. Hold still." The whiskey burned as she cleaned the wound, and Mason gritted his teeth against the pain. Zara worked with confidence, her touch gentle but thorough. "You said you have been managing your own affairs," she said as she worked. "Does that mean you are just passing through Randsburg?" "That was the plan. I heard there might be ranch work in the area, somewhere that needs an experienced hand. Cattle or horses, I am capable with both. The Sutter Ranch, about 10 miles north of town, is always looking for help. They run cattle and have been expanding their operation. The owner, James Sutter, is a fair man from what I hear." Zara began wrapping the bandage around his shoulder, her fingers brushing against his skin in a way that made him acutely aware of how long it had been since he had allowed anyone this close. "You seem to know quite a bit about the area," Mason observed. "I should. I grew up here, watched Randsburg go from a collection of tents to a proper town. My father arrived in 1895 when the gold strike first happened, saw an opportunity to provide supplies to the miners rather than chase after gold himself. It proved to be the wiser choice. We have done well here, and I intend to keep it that way." There was pride in her voice and something else, a determination that suggested she had fought for her place in this town. "Your father is fortunate to have such a capable daughter running things." Zara paused in her bandaging, and something flickered across her face, too quick for Mason to identify. "My father passed away 6 months ago. A fever took him suddenly. I run the store myself now, along with my younger brother who helps with the heavy lifting and inventory." "I am sorry for your loss." Mason meant it. He understood loss, had experienced enough of it in his 32 years to recognize the weight it left behind. "Thank you." Zara finished securing the bandage and stepped back to examine her work. "There, keep it clean and dry. Change the bandage twice daily. You should avoid any strenuous activity for at least a few days, though I suspect you will ignore that advice." Mason stood carefully, testing the mobility of his arm. Zara had done an excellent job. "What do I owe you for the supplies and your time?" $2 for the supplies. My assistance comes free of charge, though I would appreciate it if you could avoid getting shot again while in Randsburg. It reflects poorly on our town's reputation." There was a hint of humor in her voice now, a slight quirk to her lips that transformed her serious expression into something warmer. Mason paid her, adding an extra $1 despite her protest. "For the trouble of opening after hours, and I will do my best to avoid any further incidents." As he turned to leave, Zara spoke again. "Mr. Fletcher, if you do end up at the Sutter Ranch, you will likely be coming into town for supplies. We open at 7 in the morning and close at 6 in the evening. I keep a well-stocked store and my prices are fair." "I will keep that in mind, Miss Reynolds." Mason tipped his hat to her and made his way out into the night, feeling her eyes on his back until he was well down the street. He found a modest boarding house and paid for a week's stay, too tired to ride out to the Sutter Ranch tonight. The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a single window that looked out onto the main street. Mason removed his boots and lay down carefully, his shoulder throbbing but manageable. As he drifted toward sleep, his thoughts kept returning to Zara Reynolds. There was something about her, a strength and independence that reminded him of the women he had known growing up in Montana. Women who had carved out lives in harsh territory through sheer determination. But there was also a vulnerability he had glimpsed when she mentioned her father, a suggestion that running the store alone was not as easy as she made it appear. Mason had spent the past 5 years deliberately avoiding any kind of permanent attachment. After his family's ranch in Montana was lost to drought and debt, after watching his father work himself to death trying to save something that could not be saved, Mason had sworn he would never put down roots again. He would work, earn his pay, and move on before the weight of responsibility and inevitable loss could crush him again. Yet something about Randsburg felt different. Perhaps it was the town itself, still young and full of possibility. Perhaps it was the job prospect at the Sutter Ranch, which sounded more stable than the temporary cattle drive work he had been doing. Or perhaps, though he was reluctant to admit it even to himself, it was the green-eyed woman who had tended his wound with capable hands and looked at him as though she could see past the drifter exterior to something more. The next morning, Mason woke early and made his way to a small restaurant that served breakfast. The place was busy with miners and ranch hands fueling up before their workday began. He ordered eggs, bacon, and coffee, savoring the hot meal after weeks of cooking over campfires. "You are new in town," said the man sitting next to him at the counter, a weathered fellow with a thick gray beard and kind eyes. "Name's Walter Preston. I run the telegraph office, Mason Fletcher. Just arrived last night, heard there might be work at the Sutter Ranch." "Ah, yes. James is a good man, treats his workers fair. You have ranching experience, born and raised on a cattle ranch in Montana. Been working drives and various spreads across Nevada and California for the past 5 years. Walter nodded approvingly. "Well, you should have no trouble then. James has been looking for experienced hands. His foreman, Carlos Martinez, is the one who does the hiring. Tell him Walter sent you. It might help." They talked easily as they ate, Walter sharing information about Randsburg and the surrounding area. The town was thriving on gold mining, but the ranches provided stability and food for the growing population. The Sutter Ranch was one of the largest, with several hundred head of cattle and plans to expand into horse breeding. After breakfast, Mason retrieved his horse from the livery and rode north out of town toward the Sutter Ranch. The morning air was cool, though he knew the day would grow hot as the sun climbed higher. The desert landscape stretched out around him, dotted with Joshua trees and scrub brush, the mountains rising in the distance like ancient sentinels. The Sutter Ranch came into view after an hour's ride, a sprawling operation with a large main house, several outbuildings, corrals, and a bunkhouse for the ranch hands. Mason could see cattle grazing in the distance, and the whole place had an air of prosperity and good management. He found Carlos Martinez near the corrals, a man in his mid-40s with dark hair going gray at the temples and the confident bearing of someone who knew his business. Mason introduced himself and explained his purpose. Carlos looked him over carefully, his eyes noting the bandage visible beneath Mason's shirt collar. "You have experience with cattle, 15 years from Montana to California. I can rope, brand, break horses if needed. I am good with repairs and general ranch work as well." "Why are you looking for work here?" "Most drifters prefer the cattle drives, better pay for shorter commitment." Mason appreciated the direct question. "I am looking for something more stable. I have spent enough time on the trail." "Randsburg seems like a town with a future, and from what I hear, this ranch is well run." Carlos nodded slowly. "I can offer you $40 a month plus room and board in the bunkhouse. Work is dawn to dusk most days, longer during roundup and branding season. We treat our hands fair, but I expect hard work and no trouble. Mr. Sutter does not tolerate drinking on the job or fighting among the crew." "That suits me fine. Then you are hired. Get yourself settled in the bunkhouse, third building on the left. Dinner is at 6 in the main house kitchen. Tomorrow morning, meet me at the corrals at dawn and I will start you off with the rest of the crew." Mason spent the rest of the day getting settled and meeting the other ranch hands. There were 8 men besides himself, a mix of ages and backgrounds, but all experienced workers. They were friendly enough, welcoming him with the casual acceptance of men used to seeing people come and go. That evening, as they sat around the long table in the kitchen eating a hearty meal of beef stew and fresh bread, Mason learned more about the ranch and the surrounding area. The Sutter Ranch supplied beef to the mining operations and to towns throughout the region. Mr. Sutter himself was rarely seen, spending most of his time in Los Angeles on business, leaving Carlos to run the day-to-day operations. "You were in town last night, were you not?" asked one of the younger hands, a fellow named Tom. "I heard there was some trouble at the Gold Strike Saloon." "I left before any real trouble started," Mason said carefully. "Just a disagreement that got out of hand." "Smart man. That place can get rough when the miners have been drinking. Most of us stick to the smaller saloons when we go into town, or we just stay out here, less likely to end up in a brawl or worse." The conversation moved on to other topics, and Mason found himself relaxing into the familiar rhythm of ranch life. This was what he knew, what he had been raised to do. There was satisfaction in hard work, in tending to animals and maintaining the land. Perhaps here he could find some measure of peace. Yet as he lay in his bunk that night, listening to the snores of the other men and the distant sounds of cattle, his thoughts drifted back to Zara Reynolds. He told himself it was only because she had helped him when he was injured, that his interest was merely gratitude. But he knew that was not entirely true. There had been something in the way she looked at him, a directness and intelligence that intrigued him. And the way she spoke about her father's store, the pride and determination in her voice, suggested a woman who would not be easily swayed by smooth words or false promises. Mason had never been much good at courting women. His life had been focused on survival and work, leaving little time for romance. The few relationships he had experienced had been brief and superficial, ending when he moved on to the next job. He had told himself he preferred it that way, that emotional attachments only led to pain and disappointment. But something had shifted last night in that store. For the first time in years, Mason found himself wondering what it might be like to stay in one place, to build something lasting. The thought terrified him as much as it intrigued him. The next few weeks fell into a steady pattern. Mason worked hard at the ranch, proving his worth to Carlos and earning the respect of the other hands. He was good with horses, patient and firm, and he could read cattle better than most. Carlos began giving him more responsibility, putting him in charge of breaking a new string of horses Mr. Sutter had purchased. Every Saturday, Mason rode into Randsburg for supplies, a task he had volunteered for more often than was strictly necessary. He told himself it was because he enjoyed the ride, the chance to see the town and keep up with news from the wider world. But he knew the real reason was the chance to see Zara Reynolds. Each visit to the general store revealed more about her. She ran the business with impressive competence, knowing her inventory down to the last nail and always able to suggest exactly what was needed. She was respected by the miners and other townspeople, who came to her not just for supplies but for advice and sometimes just for conversation. Her younger brother, Simon, was 17 and eager but still learning the business. Zara was patient with him, teaching him the same way their father must have taught her. Mason found himself lingering in the store longer than necessary, engaging Zara in conversation about everything from the weather to politics. She had opinions on everything and was not afraid to express them, even when they disagreed with his own. They argued good-naturedly about whether California or Montana had better cattle country, about the merits of different horse breeds, about the future of Randsburg as the gold veins eventually played out. "This town will need to diversify," Zara said one Saturday afternoon as she tallied up his purchases. "Mining is profitable now, but gold does not last forever. The ranches will become more important and we need to attract other businesses. Perhaps a proper hotel, maybe even a railroad spur eventually." "You have given this considerable thought," Mason observed, admiring the way her eyes lit up when she talked about her plans for the town. "Someone has to think about the future. Most people are too focused on getting rich quick to consider what happens after the gold runs out. But I intend to still be here, still running this store, long after the last mine closes." She handed him his change, her fingers briefly brushing against his palm in a way that sent an unexpected jolt through him. "I believe you will be," Mason said softly. "You strike me as someone who accomplishes whatever she sets her mind to." Zara looked up at him, something shifting in her expression. For a moment, the professional shopkeeper disappeared, replaced by a woman who seemed almost vulnerable. "That is kind of you to say, Mr. Fletcher, though I confess some days are harder than others. Running this store alone, managing the finances, dealing with difficult customers, it can be overwhelming." "I imagine so. But from what I have seen, you handle it all with grace and strength. Your father would be proud." He saw emotion flicker across her face before she composed herself. "Thank you. That means more than you might realize." She glanced toward the back of the store where her brother was sorting inventory. "Simon tries to help, but he is still young. He wants to prospect for gold like his friends, not run a store. I worry about what will happen if he decides to leave." "Have you talked to him about it?" "Some. He knows I need his help, but I also do not want to trap him here if his heart is elsewhere. Everyone deserves to chase their own dreams." There was a wistfulness in her voice that made Mason wonder what dreams she might have set aside to run the store. Before he could respond, the door opened, and a group of miners entered, their voices loud and demanding. Zara's professional demeanor snapped back into place instantly, and she moved to help them with their orders. Mason collected his supplies and headed out, but not before catching her eye and receiving a small smile that stayed with him all the way back to the ranch. As summer deepened, Mason found himself thinking about Zara constantly. He looked forward to his Saturday trips to town with an eagerness that did not go unnoticed by the other ranch hands. "You got a girl in Randsburg?" Tom asked one evening as they were mending fences. "You ride into town every chance you get, and you always come back looking like a man who has seen something he likes." Mason tried to deflect. Just getting supplies and seeing what is happening in town. It makes a change from staring at cattle all week." Tom laughed. "Sure, that is what it is. Let me guess. The pretty shopkeeper at Reynolds' General Store. I have seen how she looks at you when we go in for supplies. That is not just a professional interest, friend. Miss Reynolds is a respectable woman running a business. I doubt she has time for such things." "Maybe she has not had time before, but that does not mean she does not want it. From what I hear, she has turned down half the eligible men in town and some who were not so eligible, but I have not seen her turn you away." Tom gave him a knowing look. "Life is short, Mason. If you like her, you should do something about it before someone else does." The advice stayed with Mason, warring with his deep-seated reluctance to form attachments. But Zara Reynolds had gotten under his skin in a way no one else had managed. He found himself thinking about her at odd moments, remembering the way she laughed at his jokes, the intelligence in her eyes when they discussed books they had both read, the competence with which she handled every challenge that came her way. He realized he was falling in love with her, and the realization terrified him. Love meant vulnerability, meant opening himself up to the possibility of loss. He had built his life around avoiding exactly this feeling, and yet here he was, completely unable to stop thinking about a woman who deserved far more than a drifter cowboy with nothing to offer but his labor. The breaking point came in late August. Mason rode into Randsburg on a Saturday to find the store closed and a hastily written sign on the door indicating an emergency. His heart hammering, he asked around and learned that there had been an accident at one of the mines. Several men were injured, and Zara had gone to help tend to them at Dr. Morrison's office. Mason found the doctor's office crowded with injured miners and worried family members. Dr. Morrison was working frantically, and Mason spotted Zara immediately. She was kneeling beside a badly injured man, holding his hand and speaking to him in a calm, steady voice while the doctor worked. Her dress was stained with blood and dirt. Her hair had come loose from its pins, but she looked more beautiful to Mason than ever before, composed and compassionate in the face of crisis. He made himself useful, helping to move patients and fetch supplies as the doctor directed. The hours blurred together as they worked to stabilize the injured men. 3 had died in the initial collapse, but the others would survive with proper care. It was well after dark when the last patient had been settled, and Dr. Morrison thanked everyone who had helped. Zara was washing her hands in a basin, her movements slow with exhaustion. Mason approached her carefully. "You should get home and rest," he said gently. She looked up at him, and he saw tears in her eyes for the first time. 3 men died today, Mason. 3 men with families, with lives and dreams and futures, and there was nothing we could do to save them. Without thinking, Mason pulled her into his arms, holding her as she finally let herself cry. She was strong, he knew that, but even the strongest people needed someone to lean on sometimes. She fit perfectly against him, and he found himself stroking her hair, murmuring words of comfort that seemed wholly inadequate but were all he had to offer. When her tears subsided, she pulled back slightly, looking up at him with red-rimmed eyes. "I apologize. That was unprofessional of me." "That was human of you," Mason corrected. "You have been strong for everyone else all day. You are allowed to feel the weight of it. My father used to say that strength was not about never feeling pain or fear, but about facing it and continuing on anyway." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I am trying to live up to that. From where I stand, you are succeeding admirably." Mason reached up and gently wiped away a remaining tear with his thumb. "But you do not have to carry everything alone, Zara. There are people who care about you who want to help, like you," she asked softly, searching his face. "Yes, like me." Mason knew he was taking a risk, but after today, after seeing how fragile life could be, he could not hold back any longer. I know I am just a ranch hand with no prospects beyond my next paycheck, and I know you deserve someone far better. But I care about you, more than I have cared about anyone in a very long time. If you will let me, I would like to be someone you can rely on. Zara's expression softened, and she reached up to place her hand against his cheek. You are not just a ranch hand, Mason Fletcher. You are a good man, a kind man, and you make me feel things I thought I had given up on when my father died. This store, this town, it has been my whole life. But when you are here, I remember that there could be more. Then let there be more, Mason said, his heart pounding. Let me court you properly, take you to dinner, maybe go for a ride on Sunday when the store is closed. I do not have much to offer, but what I have is yours if you want it. I want it, Zara whispered. I want you. Mason leaned down and kissed her gently, a soft press of lips that held all the promise of something new and precious. When they pulled apart, both were smiling despite the difficult day. Come on, Mason said, taking her hand. Let me walk you home. You need rest, and we can talk more tomorrow. They walked through the quiet streets of Randsburg, hands clasped between them, and Mason felt something he had not experienced in years. Hope. Hope for a future that extended beyond the next job. Hope for a life that included more than just surviving day to day. With Zara by his side, anything seemed possible. The next morning, Mason attended church services for the first time since arriving in Randsburg. The small church building was packed with townspeople, many still shaken by the previous day's mine accident. The pastor spoke about loss and faith, about finding strength in community and trusting in God's plan, even when it seemed incomprehensible. Mason sat near the back, and his heart lifted when Zara entered with her brother. She spotted him immediately, and the smile she gave him was radiant. She made her way to sit beside him, and when their hands found each other during the hymns, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. After the service, people gathered outside to talk and share a communal meal. Mason met more of Randsburg's residents, and he noticed how warmly they spoke of Zara. She was clearly beloved in this community, respected not just for her business acumen but for her kindness and generosity. Miss Reynolds helped my family when my husband was injured last year, one woman told Mason. She extended our credit at the store, never pressured us for payment, just told us to settle up when we could. I do not know what we would have done without her compassion. Similar stories emerged throughout the afternoon. Zara had quietly helped countless families, never seeking recognition or repayment beyond what people could afford. She had organized fundraisers for families struck by tragedy, had advocated for safety improvements in the mines, had used her position in the community to make Randsburg a better place for everyone. Mason felt both humbled and proud. This woman who had captured his heart was even more remarkable than he had realized, and somehow, inexplicably, she had chosen him. As the afternoon wore on, Mason and Zara found themselves walking along the edge of town, away from the crowd. The desert stretched before them, beautiful in its harsh way, and they talked about everything and nothing. Tell me about Montana, Zara said as they paused near a cluster of Joshua trees. You have mentioned it before, but you always change the subject quickly. What was it like growing up there? Mason was quiet for a moment, old pain surfacing. It was beautiful, hard country but beautiful. My family had a cattle ranch near the Yellowstone River. My father built it from nothing, and for a while we did well. But then came the drought, year after year of insufficient rain. The cattle died, we could not pay our debts, and eventually we lost everything. He swallowed hard. My father died a broken man, and my mother followed him 6 months later, I think her heart just gave out from grief. Zara squeezed his hand. I am so sorry, Mason. That must have been devastating. It taught me that nothing lasts, that no matter how hard you work or how much you love something, it can all disappear. That is why I have spent the past 5 years drifting, never staying anywhere long enough to care too much. I thought if I did not put down roots, I could not be hurt again. He looked at her intently. But then I met you, and suddenly all my careful defenses meant nothing. I understand more than you might think, Zara said softly. When my father died, I felt like my world had ended. He was my anchor, the person who believed in me when no one else did. Running the store alone, I have had moments of wanting to sell everything and leave, to escape the responsibility and the memories. But I stayed because this was his dream, and I am determined to honor it. She paused. What I am learning, though, is that sometimes honoring the past means building a future that includes new dreams, new people to care about. Are you saying you care about me? Mason asked, a smile tugging at his lips despite the serious conversation. I believe I already made that clear when I kissed you back last night, Zara said with a hint of humor. But yes, Mason Fletcher, I care about you very much. You have shown me that I do not have to carry everything alone, that there can be joy and partnership even in the midst of responsibility. Mason pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. I cannot promise I will not mess this up. I have spent so long protecting myself that I am not sure I remember how to let someone in completely. But I want to try, Zara. For you, I want to try. That is all I ask, she whispered. We will figure it out together. They kissed again, longer this time, and Mason felt something deep within him begin to heal. The scared, wounded man who had ridden into Randsburg just months ago was transforming into someone new, someone who dared to hope and love again. The following weeks brought a happiness Mason had not known was possible. He continued his work at the Sutter Ranch, but now his Saturday trips to town took on new meaning. He would complete his supply runs quickly, then spend the rest of the day with Zara. They took walks along the outskirts of town, shared meals at the local restaurant, and spent long evenings sitting on the porch of the store talking about their hopes and dreams. Zara shared her vision for expanding the business, perhaps opening a second location in one of the nearby towns. She talked about wanting to bring more culture to Randsburg, maybe starting a library or organizing social events that would strengthen the community. Her passion was infectious, and Mason found himself getting drawn into her plans, offering suggestions and support. For his part, Mason began to share more about his own dreams, things he had buried deep after losing his family's ranch. He talked about wanting to have his own spread someday, nothing as large as what his father had attempted, but a manageable operation where he could raise quality horses. Zara listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions and encouraging him to believe it was possible. You could do it, you know, she said one evening as they sat watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. You have the experience and the work ethic. It would take time and money, but it could happen. Maybe someday, Mason said, though for the first time he allowed himself to truly consider it. First, I need to save more money, learn everything I can from Carlos about ranch management. But maybe if things work out, it could be a possibility. When things work out, Zara corrected gently. Not if, when. I have faith in you, Mason. You should have faith in yourself. Her confidence in him was humbling and empowering. Mason worked harder than ever at the Sutter Ranch, taking on additional responsibilities and saving every penny he could. Carlos noticed his increased dedication and initiative. You have changed since you first arrived, Carlos observed one day as they were checking fences. You work like a man with a purpose now, not just someone putting in time for a paycheck. I suppose I have found reasons to think about the future, Mason admitted. Carlos smiled knowingly. Miss Reynolds is a fine woman. If you are thinking about settling down, you could do far worse. But ranching on your own takes capital. Have you given thought to how you might achieve that dream? Some, though I admit I do not have clear answers yet. I have about $200 saved, which is nowhere near enough to buy land and stock it properly. Mr. Sutter has a program for his most promising hands, Carlos said carefully. He provides backing for men who want to start their own small operations, in exchange for first rights to purchase their cattle and horses. It is a good arrangement, helps him expand his network, while giving hardworking men a chance at ownership. If you are interested, I could speak with him on your behalf when he visits next month. Mason felt a surge of hope. I would be very interested, yes. Thank you, Carlos. You have earned it. You are one of the best hands I have had in years, and you have a good head on your shoulders. Mr. Sutter appreciates men who work hard and have vision. I cannot promise anything, but I think you would make a strong case. That evening, Mason rode into town even though it was not his usual day. He found Zara closing up the store and could not contain his excitement as he shared the news. Her joy matched his own, and she threw her arms around him in an embrace that felt like coming home. This is wonderful, Mason. This could be exactly the opportunity you need. She pulled back to look at him, her eyes shining. Where would you want to establish your ranch? Somewhere near Randsburg. That would be my hope if good land is available. I would want to be close to town, close to you. He cupped her face in his hands. Zara, I know we have only been courting for a couple of months, but I need you to know that I am serious about this, about us. I am not going anywhere. Whatever I build, I want to build it with you in mind. I am serious too, Zara said softly. More serious than I ever thought I could be. You have brought something back to life in me, Mason. Something I thought died with my father. You have shown me that I can be more than just a shopkeeper carrying on a legacy. I can be a woman with her own dreams and desires, and right now, my strongest desire is to build a future with you. They kissed there in the twilight, and Mason knew with absolute certainty that he wanted to spend the rest of his life with this remarkable woman. When Mr. Sutter visited the ranch in September, Mason met with him to discuss the proposition. James Sutter was a distinguished man in his 50s, successful and shrewd but fair in his business dealings. He listened carefully as Mason outlined his experience and his plans for a small horse breeding operation. Carlos speaks highly of you, Mr. Sutter said, leaning back in his chair. That means a great deal, as Carlos is an excellent judge of character and ability. Tell me, why horses instead of cattle? I have always had an affinity for horses, sir. I am good at reading them, training them. I believe there is a strong market for quality horses, especially as the region continues to grow. Ranches, freight companies, even the army, they all need reliable mounts. I could breed and train horses that would have a reputation for soundness and good temperament. Interesting. And where would you want to establish this operation? Within 10 miles of Randsburg, if suitable land is available. I want to be close to town for supplies and for the community there. Mr. Sutter smiled slightly. I have heard you are courting Zara Reynolds. She is a remarkable young woman. Her father was a good man, and she has done an impressive job carrying on his business. I admire that kind of determination. I admire it too, sir, very much. Well, Mason, I am inclined to help you. Here is what I propose. There is a parcel of land about 6 miles east of Randsburg, about 300 acres with a reliable creek running through it. The previous owner abandoned it when his gold claim played out. I acquired it for back taxes, but I have no immediate use for it. I will sell it to you for a fair price, and I will provide credit for you to purchase breeding stock and basic supplies. In return, I get first option to purchase any horses you train at fair market rates, and you pay me back the loan at 6% interest over 5 years. Does that sound reasonable? Mason could hardly believe what he was hearing. More than reasonable, sir. I accept, and I will work every day to make sure you never regret this investment. I do not think I will. Carlos assures me you are reliable and hardworking, and that is worth more than any financial collateral. Mr. Sutter stood and extended his hand. We will draw up the paperwork tomorrow. Welcome to the ranks of ranch ownership, Mason. Now comes the real work. Mason rode straight to Randsburg, barely able to contain his excitement. He found Zara at the store, and when he told her the news, she actually shouted with joy before remembering they were in a place of business and covering her mouth in embarrassment. But her eyes were dancing with delight, and Mason felt like the luckiest man alive. We should celebrate, Zara said. Close the store early and we can have dinner at the restaurant, maybe take a walk afterward. There is something I need to ask you first. Mason took her hands in his, suddenly nervous. Zara, I know we have not been courting very long by conventional standards, but I also know my own heart. I love you. You have shown me what my life was missing, what I was running from all these years. You have given me a reason to build something lasting, to put down roots and fight for a future. He saw realization dawning in her eyes, saw hope and love shining there. I do not have a ring yet, and this is probably not the most romantic setting, but I cannot wait another moment. Zara Reynolds, will you marry me? Will you build this new life with me, combining our dreams into something better than either of us could achieve alone? Tears were streaming down Zara's face, but she was smiling brilliantly. Yes, Mason Fletcher. Yes, I will marry you. I love you too, more than I knew it was possible to love someone. You have shown me that I can be strong and still need someone, that I can honor my father's memory while building my own life. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Mason kissed her thoroughly, not caring that they were in the store where anyone could walk in. When they finally pulled apart, both were laughing and crying at the same time. We have so much to plan, Zara said, wiping her eyes. The wedding, the ranch, figuring out how to manage the store and the ranch together. It will be complicated. We will figure it out, Mason assured her. Together, we can handle anything. The news of their engagement spread quickly through Randsburg, met with genuine happiness from the community. Zara was beloved, and people were pleased to see her finding love after the difficult year following her father's death. Several women approached Mason to tell him he was a lucky man, and he wholeheartedly agreed. They set the wedding date for November, giving them 2 months to prepare. Zara wanted a simple ceremony in the church with a reception afterward, nothing too elaborate but meaningful. Mason was content with whatever she wanted, just eager to make her his wife officially. Those 2 months passed in a blur of activity. Mason continued working at the Sutter Ranch while beginning to prepare his new land. He spent every spare moment clearing brush, making plans for where to build the house and barns, and researching horse breeding lines. Carlos continued to mentor him, and several of the other ranch hands volunteered their time to help with the initial construction. Zara threw herself into wedding planning while continuing to run the store. Her brother Simon surprised everyone by stepping up to take on more responsibility, perhaps finally realizing how much his sister had sacrificed for him. He proved more capable than anyone had given him credit for, and Zara began to trust him with increasingly important tasks. I think he is finally growing up, Zara told Mason one evening as they sat reviewing plans for the ranch house. He told me yesterday that he understands now why the store is important, why building something lasting matters more than chasing after quick riches. I think your influence has been good for him. He just needed to see a different example, Mason said, and to understand that his sister needed his support, not just his presence. The wedding day arrived with clear blue skies and unusually mild November weather. The small church was packed with friends and community members, all there to witness Mason and Zara exchange their vows. Zara wore a simple but elegant dress of cream-colored silk, her auburn hair pinned up with small flowers woven through it. She looked so beautiful that Mason felt his breath catch when she walked down the aisle. The ceremony was touching and heartfelt. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, Mason kissed his bride with all the love and promise he felt. The church erupted in applause and they walked back down the aisle together, hands clasped, ready to face whatever came next as partners. The reception was held at the largest saloon in town, which had been temporarily converted into a more family-friendly venue. There was food, music, and dancing. Mason, who had never been much for social gatherings, found himself genuinely enjoying the celebration. He danced with his new wife, held her close, and marveled at how far he had come from the wounded drifter who had ridden into Randsburg just 6 months earlier. As the evening wound down, Mason and Zara prepared to leave for their new home. They had spent the past 2 weeks building a small but sturdy cabin on the ranch property, just enough to get them started. It was modest, but it was theirs, and that made it perfect. "I cannot wait to see it," Zara said as they rode out together under the stars. "Our home, the place where we will build our life." When they arrived, Mason dismounted and helped Zara down from her horse. Then, in a gesture that made her laugh with delight, he swept her up in his arms and carried her across the threshold of their new home. He had spent the afternoon decorating with lanterns and wildflowers, wanting to make their first night special. "It is perfect," Zara breathed, looking around at the simple interior. "Absolutely perfect." That night, they consummated their marriage with tenderness and passion, discovering each other in the most intimate way. Afterward, lying in each other's arms in the darkness, they talked about their hopes for the future. "I want children," Zara said softly. "Not right away, perhaps. We should get the ranch established first. But someday, I want to fill this house with the sound of laughter and little feet running around." "I want that too," Mason said, stroking her hair. "I want to build something that will last for generations, something we can pass on to our children and their children, a legacy built on love and hard work." "We will," Zara assured him. "Together, we can do anything." The first year of marriage was challenging but rewarding. Mason worked tirelessly to establish his horse breeding operation, purchasing quality mares and a good stallion with Mr. Sutter's backing. The first foals were born in the spring, healthy and strong, and Mason's careful breeding choices proved sound. He developed a reputation for producing horses with excellent temperaments and conformation, and he had more demand than he could immediately supply. Zara continued running the general store, with Simon now taking over many of the day-to-day operations. This freed her to spend more time at the ranch, where she proved invaluable in managing the business side of the operation. She kept meticulous records, negotiated sales with buyers, and used her connections in town to promote Mason's horses. They fell into an easy partnership, each contributing their strengths. Mason handled the physical work of training and caring for the horses, while Zara managed finances and marketing. On Sundays, they rested together, taking long rides across their property or sitting on their porch watching the sunset and planning for the future. "We make a good team," Mason observed one evening as they reviewed their accounts and saw that they were ahead of schedule in paying back Mr. Sutter. "We make a great team," Zara corrected with a smile. I could not have asked for a better partner in life or business." As their first anniversary approached, Zara revealed news that filled Mason with joy and terror in equal measure. "I am pregnant," she said simply one morning. "We are going to have a baby." Mason pulled her into his arms, holding her tight as emotions overwhelmed him. A child, their child, a new life created from their love. It was everything he had wanted and everything that scared him, the ultimate commitment to a future he could not control. "I am terrified," he admitted honestly. "What if something goes wrong? What if I am not a good father? What if I cannot protect you both?" Zara cupped his face, making him look at her. "You will be an excellent father, Mason. You are kind, patient, and hardworking. Our child will be lucky to have you. And yes, things might go wrong. Life is uncertain, as we both know too well. But we cannot let fear stop us from living fully and loving completely. We face the future together, whatever it brings." Her words steadied him, and he nodded. "Together," he agreed. "Always together." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Mason worried constantly. He was overprotective, wanting Zara to rest more and work less, which she tolerated with good humor. Dr. Morrison examined her regularly and pronounced both mother and baby healthy. As Zara's belly grew, so did Mason's sense of wonder and responsibility. He added rooms to their cabin, wanting to make sure they had plenty of space for their growing family. He worked on building furniture for the nursery, crafting a cradle from smooth oak with his own hands. In June of 1899, on a warm evening when the desert air smelled of sage and promise, Zara went into labor. Mason rode frantically to fetch Dr. Morrison, and then paced outside their bedroom while the doctor and a midwife from town attended to his wife. Every cry of pain from Zara tore at his heart, making him feel helpless and desperate. After what seemed like an eternity but was actually only 6 hours, he heard the lusty cry of a newborn. Dr. Morrison emerged, smiling. "Congratulations, you have a healthy son, and your wife did wonderfully. She is tired but well. You can go in now." Mason entered the bedroom on shaking legs. Zara was propped up against pillows, looking exhausted but radiantly happy. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket, and when Mason approached, she pulled back the fabric to reveal their son. "Meet Matthew," Zara said softly. "Matthew Fletcher." The baby had a shock of dark hair and was already trying to open his eyes. Mason reached out with one finger to touch his son's impossibly small hand, and the baby's fingers curled around his, gripping with surprising strength. Something deep within Mason's chest cracked open, releasing years of protective walls and buried pain. This tiny person, this perfect little life, was his son. His and Zara's. A piece of both of them, a hope for the future made flesh. "He is perfect," Mason whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You are amazing, Zara. Thank you for this gift." "We made him together," Zara said, smiling up at him. "Our little family, Mason. Everything we dreamed of." Mason sat carefully on the edge of the bed, putting his arm around his wife and gazing down at their son. He felt complete in a way he never had before, as though all the scattered pieces of his life had finally come together into something whole and meaningful. The next few months were exhausting and wonderful. Matthew proved to be a healthy baby with a good appetite and strong lungs. Mason discovered reserves of patience he had not known he possessed, walking the floor with his son during fussy nights, changing diapers with increasingly practiced hands, and watching in wonder as Matthew grew and changed daily. Zara was a natural mother, nurturing and confident. She somehow managed to continue helping with the ranch business while caring for their son, though she had cut back her hours at the store significantly. Simon had proven himself capable of running the general store with minimal supervision, allowing Zara to focus on her own family. The horse breeding operation continued to thrive. Mason's reputation grew, and he was able to expand his operation, purchasing more land adjacent to their original property. Mr. Sutter was pleased with Mason's success and had become not just a business partner but a friend and mentor. As Matthew celebrated his first birthday in June of 1900, Mason looked around at the party they had organized at their ranch. The yard was filled with friends from town, ranch hands who had become like family, and business associates who had become friends. Zara was laughing as Matthew smashed his hands into a cake she had baked, getting more of it on his face than in his mouth. The house they had built was now a proper home, expanded and comfortable, with room for more children if they were blessed. "You look content," Carlos said, coming to stand beside Mason, "like a man who has found exactly where he belongs." "I feel that way," Mason admitted. "I spent years running from attachment, from the possibility of loss. I thought if I never cared too deeply, I could never be hurt again. But what I was really doing was running from life itself. And then Zara came along and changed everything," Carlos said with a knowing smile. "She showed me what I was missing, not just love and family, but purpose and hope. She showed me that the risk of loss is worth taking because the alternative is a half-life, empty and meaningless." Mason watched his wife and son, his heart full. "I did not know what I was missing until she arrived and showed me everything." The years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and challenges. In 1901, Zara gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Emily. She had Zara's green eyes and auburn hair, and she was fierce from the moment she was born. Mason discovered that having a daughter brought its own particular brand of terror and delight. He was already dreading the day when boys would start coming around, though Zara laughed at his overprotectiveness. "She is 2 years old, Mason. You have some time before you need to worry about suitors." "I am just planning ahead," Mason protested, cradling Emily carefully, "making sure I know where all the shotguns are stored." The ranch continued to grow. By 1902, Mason had paid off his debt to Mr. Sutter ahead of schedule and had expanded his operations to include cattle as well as horses. They had hired several ranch hands to help with the increased workload, and the Fletcher ranch was becoming well known throughout the region. Zara had eventually sold her share of the general store to Simon, who had married and wanted to establish himself independently. The sale provided capital for further ranch expansion and freed Zara to focus entirely on their family and the ranch business. She had no regrets, recognizing that sometimes the best way to honor the past was to embrace the future. In 1904, their third child was born, another son they named Daniel. Matthew was now 5 and already following his father everywhere, eager to learn about horses and ranching. Emily was 3 and into everything, fearless and curious. The house rang with the sounds of children's laughter, and Mason sometimes had to pause and marvel at how different his life had become. One evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset while their children played in the yard, Zara leaned her head against Mason's shoulder. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. "Giving up your wandering life, settling down here?" Mason turned to look at her, seeing the woman who had transformed his entire existence. Her face showed the passage of time, with faint lines around her eyes and mouth, but she was more beautiful to him than ever. "Not for a single moment," he said firmly. "You gave me everything I needed but did not know how to want. A home, a family, a purpose that extends beyond just surviving. I was existing before I met you, Zara. Now I am truly living." "I feel the same way," Zara said, reaching for his hand. "I thought I had my life figured out, that running the store was enough, but you showed me that I could have so much more." You gave me partnership, passion, and a family I never dared to dream about." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children play. Matthew was helping Emily climb a tree while baby Daniel crawled determinedly across the grass, heading for his siblings with single-minded focus. "We have built something good here," Mason observed. "Something that will last." "We have built something better than good," Zara corrected. "We have built a life filled with love, hard work, and hope, and we have done it together, which makes it all the more precious." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, Mason pulled Zara close and kissed her forehead. Their children's laughter floated on the evening breeze, and somewhere in the distance, one of their horses nickered contentedly. The years continued their steady march forward. Matthew grew into a capable young man who shared his father's love for horses. He became an invaluable partner in the ranch operations, with an intuitive understanding of breeding and training that suggested he would one day take over the business. Emily proved equally capable but with different interests, showing a head for numbers and business that rivaled her mother's. Daniel, the youngest, was the dreamer of the family, always reading books and asking questions about the wider world. In 1910, when Matthew turned 11, Mason officially made Zara a full partner in the ranch, drawing up papers that gave her equal ownership. It was something she had always effectively been, but he wanted it formalized, wanted her contributions and importance recognized legally. "You did not need to do this," Zara said, though her eyes were bright with tears as she looked at the documents. "I have always known we were partners in every way that mattered." "I needed to do it," Mason insisted. "Everything we have built, we built together. Your name should be on everything, official and permanent. You deserve recognition for all you have contributed." Zara threw her arms around him, and Mason held her tight, grateful once again for the day a spirited woman had walked into his life and changed everything. The children continued to grow and thrive. Matthew married a local rancher's daughter in 1906, when he was 18, and she was 17, a love match that reminded Mason and Zara of their own courtship. The young couple built a house on Fletcher Ranch property, and Matthew took over more of the day-to-day operations, allowing Mason to begin thinking about eventually stepping back. Emily showed no interest in marriage, focused instead on expanding the business side of the ranch. She traveled to Los Angeles and San Francisco, establishing contracts with buyers and building relationships that brought increased prosperity to the family operation. She was fierce, independent, and brilliant, everything Mason and Zara had hoped she would be. Daniel, true to his dreamer nature, went to college in California, studying engineering. But he always came home for summers and holidays, and he assured his parents that he intended to return permanently once his education was complete, bringing his knowledge back to help modernize the ranch. In 1915, Mason and Zara celebrated their 17th wedding anniversary. They were in their early 50s now, with silver threading through their hair and lines etched into their faces by sun and time and laughter. But their love had only deepened, growing richer with each shared experience and challenge overcome. They took a rare day away from the ranch, riding out to the place where Mason had first told Zara about his vision for the horse breeding operation. So much had changed since then, but the desert was eternal, beautiful in its harsh way. "I never imagined we would build all this," Mason said, gesturing back toward the ranch that was now out of sight but ever present in their thoughts. "When I rode into Randsburg all those years ago, wounded and directionless, I could not have dreamed of this life." "But you opened yourself to the possibility," Zara reminded him. "That is what mattered. You could have stayed closed off, could have moved on after your shoulder healed." But you let me in, let yourself hope again. That took courage, Mason. You made it easy. You were impossible not to love. Mason helped her down from her horse and pulled her close. You showed me what I was missing, not just the obvious things like love and family, but the smaller things too. The joy of watching a sunrise with someone you care about, the satisfaction of building something lasting, the peace that comes from knowing you have a partner who will face anything by your side. You showed me those things too, Zara said softly. I was so focused on duty and responsibility that I had forgotten how to dream. You reminded me that life could be an adventure, that I could honor my father's memory while still creating my own path. They stood there in the desert afternoon, holding each other as they had countless times over the years. The wind whispered through the Joshua trees, and in the distance, a hawk circled lazily against the blue sky. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had just bought your bandages and left that night? Zara asked. If I had not insisted on helping you, sometimes, Mason admitted, but I do not think it would have mattered. I think we were meant to find each other, that some force greater than us both knew what we needed. I was ready to change, even if I did not know it yet, and you were ready to let someone share your burdens. The timing was right. I like to think that is true, Zara said. That all the pain and loss we both experienced led us to exactly where we needed to be to each other. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, they mounted their horses and rode back toward home. The ranch came into view, sprawling and prosperous, with corrals full of quality horses, cattle grazing in the distance, and several buildings that housed their operation and their extended family. Matthew was working with a young horse in one of the corrals, his wife watching from the fence with their 2 young children. Emily was visible through the office window, no doubt working on the accounts. Smoke rose from the chimney of the main house, where the family would gather for dinner soon. We did well, did we not? Mason said, taking in the scene. We did better than well, Zara replied. We built a legacy, Mason, not just in buildings and animals and land, but in our children and the values we instilled in them. That will continue long after we are gone. That evening, the family gathered around the large dining table that had replaced the modest one from their early years. Children's voices mingled with adult conversation, stories were shared, and laughter filled the room. Mason looked around at the faces of those he loved, this family he and Zara had created, and felt profound gratitude. After dinner, when the younger children had been put to bed and the older ones had retreated to their own homes and rooms, Mason and Zara sat together on their porch as they had done countless evenings over the years. The stars were brilliant overhead, and the night air was cool and pleasant. "What are you thinking about?" Zara asked, noticing Mason's contemplative expression. "About that wounded cowboy who rode into Randsburg, thinking he would just get some supplies and move on. About how close I came to missing all of this because I was too afraid to take a risk on loving again." Mason shook his head. "I did not know what I was missing, Zara. I thought I was protecting myself, but I was really just existing in a gray world, neither truly happy nor truly alive. And then I showed you everything." Zara prompted with a smile, referencing a conversation they had revisited many times over the years. "You showed me everything that mattered," Mason confirmed. "You taught me that love is worth the risk of loss, that building something lasting requires vulnerability and faith. You showed me that I could be more than just a drifter, that I was capable of being a husband, a father, a partner in every sense of the word." "You taught me things too," Zara said, taking his hand. "You showed me that I did not have to carry everything alone, that accepting help was not weakness but wisdom. You taught me to dream beyond the next day's responsibilities, to think about what I wanted, not just what was expected of me. You showed me what real partnership looks like." "We were good for each other," Mason said simply. "We were perfect for each other," Zara corrected. "Are perfect for each other. This is not past tense, Mason Fletcher. We still have many years ahead of us, many more memories to make." "I intend to make every single one of them count," Mason promised. "Every day with you is a gift I never expected to receive. I will never take that for granted." They sat together under the stars, two people who had found each other at exactly the right moment and built a life that exceeded anything either had imagined possible. The ranch was quiet around them, their family safe and content under their protection. The future stretched ahead with all its uncertainties, but they would face it as they had faced everything, together. Mason thought back to that night almost 2 decades ago when he had stumbled into the general store, wounded and lost. He had thought he was just looking for bandages and whiskey, but fate had other plans. That spirited woman with green eyes and capable hands had seen past his defenses to the man he could become, had believed in him when he had stopped believing in himself. She had shown him everything: love, hope, purpose, and the courage to build something lasting despite the possibility of loss. She had taken a wounded cowboy who knew only how to run and taught him how to stay, how to fight for what mattered, how to open his heart despite past pain. And in return, he had shown her that she did not have to be strong alone, that partnership could enhance rather than diminish her strength. He had helped her see that honoring the past sometimes meant embracing the future with both hands. The years ahead brought continued prosperity and new challenges. The ranch evolved with the times, adapting to new markets and technologies while maintaining the core values Mason and Zara had established. Their children grew into capable adults who carried forward the family legacy while adding their own contributions. Matthew became a renowned horse breeder, expanding on his father's foundation. Emily's business acumen took the ranch to new heights of profitability, establishing connections throughout the western states. Daniel returned after completing his education and implemented innovations that increased efficiency while maintaining the quality standards the Fletcher name had become synonymous with. Mason and Zara became grandparents many times over, their home often filled with the sounds of grandchildren playing. They watched with pride as the next generation learned the values of hard work, integrity, and compassion. The ranch they had built together became a gathering place for family, a testament to what two people could achieve through love and determination. In 1925, on a warm June evening, Mason and Zara sat on their porch celebrating 30 years of marriage. They were both in their late 60s now, their bodies bearing the marks of a life fully lived. Mason's hands showed the calluses of decades of ranch work, and Zara's eyes had the wisdom that came from years of managing both family and business. Their children and grandchildren had organized a celebration, and the ranch was filled with friends and family from across the region. There was music and dancing, food and laughter. People came up throughout the evening to share stories about how Mason and Zara had impacted their lives, whether through business dealings, acts of kindness, or simply the example of their enduring love. As the evening wound down and the last guests departed, Mason and Zara found themselves alone on their porch once more, the place where they had shared so many quiet moments over the years. 30 years, Zara mused. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that we were just starting out, living in that tiny cabin and dreaming about what we might build. Other times, it feels like we have been together forever, like I cannot remember a time when you were not part of my life. Both are true, Mason said, putting his arm around her. Each day with you feels new and exciting, but our life together also feels eternal, like it was always meant to be this way. Do you have any regrets? Zara asked, a question she had posed before but which took on new weight with the passage of time. Not a single one, Mason said firmly. Every choice we made, every challenge we faced led us to this moment. Look at what we have built, Zara. Not just the ranch, though that is significant, but our family. 3 wonderful children who have become remarkable adults. Grandchildren who carry our values forward, a legacy that will endure for generations. We did well, Zara agreed softly. Better than I ever dreamed possible that night when a wounded cowboy walked into my store. That cowboy did not know what he was missing, Mason said, tilting her face up to his. He thought he was just passing through, looking for a temporary fix before moving on. But then, a spirited woman showed him everything he had been running from and everything he desperately needed. She showed him that love was worth the risk, that building something lasting required courage, and that he was capable of so much more than he believed. And the spirited woman learned that she did not have to face life alone, Zara added, her eyes shining with tears. That partnership made her stronger, not weaker, that accepting love was not a burden but a gift. They kissed as the stars emerged overhead, a tender expression of love that had deepened and matured over 3 decades together. The ranch was quiet around them, their family settled for the night, their legacy secure. Mason held Zara close, grateful for every moment they had shared and every moment still to come. He had not known what he was missing all those years ago, had been too wounded and frightened to see the possibilities life still held. But Zara had seen potential where he saw only limitation. She had believed in him when he could not believe in himself, had shown him patiently and persistently what a rich, full life could look like when shared with the right person. She had shown him everything that mattered: love, family, purpose, and the courage to keep going even when the path ahead seemed uncertain. And together, they had built something beautiful and lasting, a testament to what 2 people could achieve when they faced life's challenges side by side. As they sat together under the desert stars, Mason reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From that first meeting in the general store, through the early days of courtship and the challenges of establishing the ranch, to the joys of raising children and watching them become adults, every step had been worthwhile. The wounded cowboy who had ridden into Randsburg in 1897 would barely recognize the man he had become. That earlier version of himself had been closed off, convinced that avoiding attachment was the only way to protect against loss. He had been existing rather than living, going through motions rather than embracing possibilities. But Zara had changed everything. With her spirited nature, her determination, and her willingness to believe in a better future, she had shown him what he was missing. Not through grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but through daily examples of courage, compassion, and commitment. She had taught him that true strength lay not in isolation but in connection, not in protecting one's heart but in opening it fully to another person. And the ranch they had built together stood as physical proof of what their partnership had achieved. Hundreds of acres of productive land, quality horses and cattle bearing the Fletcher brand, buildings and corrals and fences that would stand for decades to come. But more importantly, they had built a family bound by love and shared values, children and grandchildren who would carry forward their legacy of hard work, integrity, and compassion. "What are you thinking about?" Zara asked, noticing Mason's faraway expression. "About how blessed I am," Mason said simply. "About how close I came to missing all of this because I was too afraid to take a chance. About how grateful I am that you saw something worth believing in when you looked at that wounded cowboy." "I saw a good man who had been hurt and needed someone to believe in him again," Zara said. "I saw strength and potential, even if you could not see it yourself. And I am so glad I took the chance, that I let you into my life and my heart." "We took a chance on each other," Mason corrected. "You were just as guarded as I was, just as wounded in your own way. We healed each other, Zara. We showed each other what life could be when shared with the right partner." As the night deepened around them and the desert settled into its peaceful nocturnal rhythm, Mason and Zara remained on their porch, holding each other and reflecting on the life they had built together. The path ahead grew shorter with each passing year, but they faced it without fear, secure in their love and proud of their legacy. The spirited woman had shown the cowboy everything he was missing, and together they had created something more beautiful and lasting than either could have achieved alone. Their love story, born in a dusty general store in a desert mining town, had blossomed into a legacy that would endure for generations, a testament to the transformative power of love, partnership, and the courage to embrace life fully, despite its inherent risks. And as they finally stood to go inside, ready to rest before another day of working together on the ranch they had built, Mason paused to kiss his wife one more time under the stars. "I love you, Zara Fletcher. Thank you for showing me everything." "I love you too, Mason. Thank you for building this beautiful life with me. Together, we have created something extraordinary." They walked inside hand in hand, ready to face whatever tomorrow brought, secure in the knowledge that their love had proven strong enough to weather any storm and build something that would last long after they were gone.